The sky above Viren Prime burned red. Commander Hyun stood on the observation deck of the Central Command building, watching the third ship descend through the atmosphere. It was massive, larger than anything the Varani had ever built. Its surface was dark and organic, pulsing with a sickly green light that made his stomach turn. "Another one," whispered Lyra, his second in command. Her voice shook. "That makes 3 hive ships now." Hyun said nothing. What could he say? The Varani had never prepared for war. They were mathematicians, artists, philosophers. Their greatest achievement was a symphony that could make listeners weep with joy. Their ships were designed to study stars, not fight monsters. The Krill had come without warning. One moment Viren Prime was peaceful. The next, the sky filled with creatures that existed only to consume. They dropped from their ships in waves, 6-legged things with mandibles that could tear through metal. Behind them came the collectors, machines that scooped up Varani by the hundreds and carried them to the hive ships. Hyun had seen the reports. He knew what happened in those ships. The Krill didn't just kill. They processed. They broke down living beings into base materials using everything. Meat became food. Bones became building materials. Even thoughts were extracted, absorbed into the hive mind. 3 weeks ago, Viren Prime had a population of 8 billion. Now half were gone. "Send another distress call," Hyun ordered. His voice was hollow. "Use all frequencies. Emergency channels, diplomatic channels, everything." Lyra hesitated. "Commander, we've sent 47 calls. No one has responded. No one is coming." "Send it anyway." Hyun watched her work, her long fingers dancing over the console. The Varani had sent their first distress call within hours of the Krill arrival. They had begged for help, explained their situation, offered everything they had in exchange for aid. The messages had reached the Galactic Assembly, the great coalition of advanced species that claimed to uphold peace and order across the stars. The Assembly had received every message. Hyun knew this because the automatic confirmation receipts kept coming back. Received, acknowledged, filed. But no help came. The Draxian Empire, with its mighty war fleet, sent a brief response. "Your situation has been noted. Resource allocation does not permit intervention at this time. Our sympathies." The Luminar Collective, masters of technology far beyond Varani understanding, sent something worse. Natural selection is a fundamental universal principle. We cannot interfere with evolutionary processes. The ancient Velkari Dominion didn't even bother with explanations. Their response was a single word: denied. Smaller species sent messages of sorrow, but no ships. Everyone had reasons. Everyone had excuses. The galaxy was very good at excuses. Hyun heard screaming from outside. He looked down at the streets below. The Krill had broken through the eastern barrier. Civilians ran in panic while the 6-legged hunters pursued them. The Varani Defense Force tried to hold them back with plasma rifles, but the weapons barely slowed the creatures down. "The southern district has fallen," reported Ken from the tactical station. "Evacuation tunnels are at maximum capacity. We're running out of places to hide people." "How long until the capital falls?" Hyun asked. Ken's face went pale. 2 days. Maybe 3 if we're lucky." Hyun nodded slowly. He had known this moment was coming. The Varani had fought as hard as they could, but they weren't warriors. They were a peaceful people being slaughtered because the galaxy didn't care enough to stop it. "Sir, we have a response to the latest distress call," Lyra said suddenly. Her eyes widened. "It's not from the Assembly. It's from... I don't recognize the designation. The signal says UNS Indomitable. UNS." Hyun frowned. "What species is that?" Checking the database now. Lyra's fingers flew over her console. "Found it. They're called humans, from a planet called Earth. They're a new species, just joined the galactic community about 50 years ago. The database says they're considered primitive by Assembly standards." Hyun felt something break inside him. Even the primitives were ignoring them now. "What does the message say?" Lyra read from her screen. "We have received your distress call. Help is coming. Hold on. The UNS Indomitable is en route to your position. Estimated arrival 21 days. Captain Jiho Park commanding." The room went silent. Everyone stared at Lyra. That's impossible," Ken said. "No one is coming." The Assembly made that clear. "The humans aren't part of the main Assembly fleet," Lyra explained, still reading. "They're independent. It says here they have limited slipstream capability. Their ship is already moving at maximum speed. Hyun felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. It was small, fragile, and he was afraid to name it. But it felt like hope. 21 days, he whispered. Can we last 21 days? No one answered. They all knew the truth. The capital would fall in 3 days. The last cities would fall within a week. In 21 days, there might not be any Varani left to save. But Hyun made a decision. If someone was coming, if someone had heard their cries when the entire galaxy turned away, then the Varani would fight. They would hold on. They would survive long enough to meet these humans, whoever they were. Send a response, Hyun ordered. Tell Captain Jiho Park that we will hold. Tell him Viren Prime will still be here when he arrives. What if we can't? Lyra asked quietly. Hyun looked at her, then at every person in the command center. Then we die knowing someone cared enough to try. That's more than the assembly gave us. He turned back to the window. Below, his people were dying. Above, 3 hive ships blocked out the stars. Somewhere far away, a ship called the Indomitable was racing through space to reach them. 21 days. It seemed impossible. But Hyun had learned something in these terrible weeks. When you're drowning and someone throws you a rope, you don't question if the rope is strong enough. You grab it and hold on with everything you have. All stations, new orders, Hyun announced. We're changing our strategy. We're no longer fighting to win. We're fighting to survive. Every hour we hold is an hour closer to help arriving. Spread the word to all remaining cities. Tell our people that help is coming. Tell them to hold on. As the orders went out, Hyun watched the burning sky. The Krill were relentless. The assembly had abandoned them. But somewhere in the dark between stars, a primitive species was coming to help. Hyun didn't know anything about humans. He didn't know if one ship could make a difference against 3 hive ships. He didn't know if they would arrive in time. But he knew one thing. When the powerful had turned away, when civilization had shown its true face, when the galaxy had decided that Varani lives didn't matter enough to save, someone had answered their call. Someone had heard them screaming. And someone was coming. Captain Jiho Park stood on the bridge of the UNS Indomitable, staring at the star charts. 3 weeks to Viren Prime at maximum speed. 3 weeks to reach a dying world that the entire galaxy had decided wasn't worth saving. Engineering reports we're running the slipstream drive at 112% capacity, said Minho, the chief engineer. He grinned despite the serious situation. The manual says we'll burn out the core if we maintain this speed for more than a week. What does your gut say? Jiho asked. Minho shrugged. My gut says the manual was written by people who never had to save a planet. We'll make it, probably, Jiho smiled. This was why he liked his crew. They understood what mattered. The decision to respond to the Varani distress call had been easy. Jiho had been reviewing routine communications when the message came through. It wasn't addressed to humanity specifically. It was a general distress call, sent to anyone who would listen. The desperation in Commander Hyun's voice had been clear even through the translation software. Jiho had called a crew meeting. All 800 people aboard the Indomitable had voted. It was unanimous. They were going. Earth Command had been less enthusiastic. You don't have authorization for this mission, Admiral Chen had said over the communication link. The Varani situation is an assembly matter. We're not members of their military alliance. This isn't our fight. Since when do we need permission to help people? Jiho had replied. The argument had gone on for an hour. In the end, Jiho had made his position clear. He was going to Viren Prime with or without authorization. Earth Command could court-martial him when he got back, if he got back. The transmission had ended badly. But 6 hours later, a new message arrived. It was from President Sorahan herself. Captain Park, the message began. Earth Command has recommended I order you to return immediately. They say your mission is reckless and politically dangerous. They're probably right. She paused. I'm authorizing your mission anyway. More than that, I'm mobilizing our entire deep space fleet to follow you. 12 ships total. We're humanity's first generation of starfarers, and I'll be damned if we start our journey into the galaxy by ignoring people who need help. Good luck, Captain. Make us proud. Jiho had played that message for his crew. The cheering had lasted 5 minutes. Now the Indomitable raced through space alone. The other 11 ships would follow, but they were 3 weeks behind. Jiho would reach Viren Prime first, alone against 3 Krill hive ships. Dr. Yuna wants to see you in the medical bay, said Lieutenant Day from Communications. She says it's urgent. Jiho made his way through the ship's corridors. Crew members saluted as he passed. They all knew what they were flying into. The krill were one of the galaxy's nightmare species. Their hive ships were massive. Their numbers were endless. Entire civilizations had fallen to them. In the medical bay, Dr. Yuna was hunched over a computer display. She looked up when Jiho entered, her face pale. "I've been studying everything we have on the krill," she said without preamble. "It's not good. Their biology is designed for one thing: consumption. They strip planets bare, process everything organic and move on. And they're tough. Small arms fire doesn't stop them. Even ship-grade weapons struggle to penetrate their armor. Is there a weak point?" Jiho asked. Yuna nodded slowly. "Maybe. The krill operate through pheromone communication. The hive ships have queen chambers that coordinate everything. If we could disrupt that communication or kill the queens, the krill would lose cohesion. How do we disrupt it? That's the problem. I don't know. No one has ever tried. Every species that fought the krill either had overwhelming force or died." She looked at Jiho. "We have one ship against 3 hive ships. The math doesn't work, Captain." Jiho understood her concern, but he had learned something in his years commanding the Indomitable. Sometimes the math didn't matter. Sometimes you did what was right and figured out the details later. "Keep working on the pheromone angle," he said. "If there's a weakness, you'll find it." Back on the bridge, Minho had news. "I've been tinkering with our weapon systems. I think I can reroute power from life support and secondary systems. Give us about 30% more firepower. Won't that risk the crew?" asked Tay, the Marine commander. She had been listening from her station. "Only if we fight for more than 2 hours," Minho said cheerfully. "After that, yeah, things get uncomfortable. But I figure if we're still fighting after 2 hours, we've got bigger problems than stale air." Jiho approved the modifications. They needed every advantage they could get. The days passed slowly. The crew trained constantly. Tay drilled her Marines in boarding procedures, preparing for the possibility of taking the fight directly to the krill ships. Yuna continued her research, filling the medical bay with biological data and chemical formulas. Minho made impossible promises about keeping the ship running beyond its limits. And Jiho tried to reach out to the galaxy one more time. He sent messages to every assembly station within range. He explained the situation. He asked for support, for backup, for any help they could provide. The responses were educational. A Draxian admiral replied first. "Your species is foolish, Captain Park. You throw away your ship and crew for strangers who mean nothing to you. This is why humanity will not survive in the galaxy. You let emotion guide you instead of logic." A Luminar diplomat was more polite but no more helpful. "While we admire your compassion, we cannot condone interference in natural processes. The strong survive. The weak perish. This is the way of the universe." The responses made Jiho angry. Not the refusal to help, though that was bad enough. It was the attitude behind the refusals. These advanced species looked at the Varani and saw numbers, statistics, evolutionary data. They didn't see people. They didn't see 8 billion individuals with families and dreams and hopes. Maybe that was the difference, Jiho thought. Maybe that was what made humans primitive in the eyes of these advanced species. Humans still cared. They still felt. They still believed that when someone was drowning, you jumped in to save them, even if you couldn't swim very well yourself. On the 19th day, Jiho recorded a message. He sent it to Earth, to the other ships following behind, and to any vessel that would receive it. "This is Captain Jiho Park of the UNS Indomitable," he began. "In 2 days we will reach Varen Prime. We will arrive alone to face an enemy that outnumbers and outguns us. The Galactic Assembly has told us we're fools. They say we're throwing our lives away for nothing. They don't understand why we're doing this," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "They ask me why humanity would sacrifice for strangers. I'll tell them why. Because we heard someone crying for help and we chose to answer. Because we believe that every life matters, not just the strong or the advanced or the strategically important. Because when we look at the Varani, we don't see statistics. We see people who deserve to live." Jiho looked directly into the camera. "The Assembly says emotion makes us weak. I say it makes us human. And if caring about others is primitive, then I'm proud to be primitive." Indomitable out, the message spread across the galaxy. Some species laughed. Some shook their heads at human foolishness. But others, the smaller species, The ones who lived in fear of the krill and species like them, those species listened, and they wondered. 2 days later, the Indomitable dropped out of slipstream drive at the edge of the Varan system. The sensors immediately lit up with contacts. 3 massive krill hive ships orbited the planet. Varan Prime itself was burning. Continents that had once glowed with city lights were now dark. Reading minimal Varani communications, Day reported quietly. The planet still inhabited, but barely. Jiho looked at the tactical display. 1 human ship. 3 krill hive ships, each 5 times the size of the Indomitable. Behind him, his crew waited for orders. All hands battle stations, Jiho commanded. His voice was calm. Marines, prepare for boarding action. Engineering, give me everything you've got. Medical, get ready for casualties. He looked at the image of Varan Prime on the main screen. Somewhere down there, Commander Hyun and what remained of his people were waiting. They had held on for 3 weeks, believing help would come. Helm, Jiho said, take us in. Let's show these krill what happens when they pick on someone humanity cares about. The Indomitable began its attack run. 1 small ship against impossible odds, carrying hope to a world the galaxy had abandoned. The first missile strike caught the krill completely off guard. The lead hive ship's shields flickered and died as 6 nuclear-tipped warheads detonated in sequence. The krill had sensors, of course, but they had never encountered a species that opened combat by throwing their most powerful weapons immediately. Direct hit on Target 1, Day reported. Their shields are down. Hull damage minimal. Jiho had expected that. The krill hive ships were organic, grown rather than built. They could take incredible punishment, but shields were shields, and now 1 ship was vulnerable. Minho, how's our power? Jiho asked. Redirecting everything to weapons and engines, the engineer replied. Life support is on minimum. We've got about 90 minutes before things get uncomfortable. Then we'd better work fast. Helm, bring us around for another pass. Target the damaged ship. The Indomitable curved through space, its engines burning bright. The 3 krill hive ships were beginning to respond. The closest one launched a swarm of fighters, organic craft that moved like insects through the void. Incoming, warned Tay from her station. Looks like about 200 fighters. Point defense systems fire at will, Jiho ordered. The Indomitable's automated guns began tracking and destroying the krill fighters. But there were too many. Some got through, slamming into the ship's hull. The Indomitable shuddered with each impact. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7, reported Day. Sealing bulkheads now. Jiho watched the tactical display. This was going badly. 1 ship against 3 was suicide, just like everyone had said. But the Indomitable wasn't trying to win. It was trying to survive long enough for the cavalry to arrive, and it was trying to save as many Varani as possible. Dr. Yuna, any progress on that pheromone disruption? Jiho asked over the comm. Actually, yes, Yuna's voice came back. I've been studying human biochemistry compared to krill biology. Our adrenaline has a compound that should interfere with their communication chemicals. I can synthesize it, but I need time. How much time? At least an hour. Jiho made a decision. Tay, take your Marines and prepare for boarding action. We're going into that damaged hive ship. Sir? Tay sounded surprised. That's insane. We'll be outnumbered thousands to 1, I know. But if we can get inside, we can buy time. The krill will have to deal with us internally instead of focusing on the planet, and maybe we can find that queen chamber Yuna mentioned. There was a pause. Then Tay laughed. You know what, Captain? I've always wanted to see the inside of a hive ship. Preparing boarding parties now. The Indomitable dove toward the damaged krill vessel. More fighters swarmed around them. The point defense guns kept firing, filling space with debris. Distance to target? 500 meters, the helmsman called out. Brace for impact, Jiho warned. The Indomitable slammed into the side of the hive ship. The reinforced prow of the human vessel punched through the organic hull like a spear. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as the 2 vessels merged in a violent embrace. We're stuck in their hull, Minho reported. I can't pull us free. Don't try, Jiho said. Tay, you're clear to board. The Marines moved quickly. They blew open the airlocks and poured into the hive ship's corridors. Tay led from the front, her rifle blazing. The inside of the hive ship was a nightmare. The walls were organic, pulsing with sickly light. The air was thick and humid. And the krill were everywhere. The creatures came at them in waves, 6-legged, armored with mandibles that could shred metal. But Tay's Marines had trained for close-quarters combat. They moved in tight formations, covering each other, using explosives to collapse corridors behind them. Push forward, Tay commanded. Find something important and break it. On the bridge, Jiho watched the second hive ship moving to attack. Its weapons were charging, preparing to fire on the immobilized Indomitable. All remaining power to shields, Jiho ordered. This is going to hurt. The krill weapon fired. It was a beam of concentrated energy that struck the Indomitable like a hammer. The shields held for 3 seconds, then collapsed. The beam cut into the hull, slicing through deck after deck. Multiple casualties, Day reported, his voice shaking. Decks 8 through 12 are gone. We've lost main power. Switch to auxiliary, Jiho said. Keep those point defense guns running. Deep inside the hive ship, Tay and her Marines fought their way through corridors that seemed designed by madness. They found processing chambers where krill were converting Varani bodies into raw materials. They found nurseries where new krill were being grown. They found databanks filled with stolen memories. And then they found the Queen Chamber. It was massive, a cathedral of flesh and bone. At the center sat the Queen, a creature the size of a building. Around her, worker krill tended to eggs and processed information from the hive mind. Plant the charges, Tay ordered. We're bringing this whole section down. Her Marines spread out, placing explosives on the chamber's support structures. The krill defenders came at them in a frenzy, but the humans held their ground. Charges set, reported Sergeant Kim. Ready to detonate on your order. Tay looked at the Queen. The creature was staring at her with eyes that held alien intelligence. It knew what was about to happen. It knew it was going to die. Now, Tay said. The explosives detonated in sequence. The Queen Chamber collapsed, killing the Queen and hundreds of worker krill. The entire hive ship shuddered. On the Indomitable's bridge, sensors showed the krill vessel going dark. Its systems were failing. The fighters that had been attacking in coordinated patterns suddenly became erratic, confused. The Queen's dead, Jiho realized. Tay, get your people out of there. That ship's going to tear itself apart. But it was too late. The hive ship was already breaking apart. Tay and her Marines were trapped inside a dying vessel. Can we pull free? Jiho asked Minho. Not without engines, and we don't have engines. That last hit fried our main reactor. Jiho felt time slow down. His ship was dying. His Marines were trapped. The other 2 hive ships were moving in for the kill. This was it. They had tried, but it wasn't enough. Then sensors picked up new contacts. Lots of them, Captain Day said, his voice filled with wonder. I'm reading slipstream signatures. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL. The tactical display updated. 11 ships appeared, spread in battle formation. The rest of humanity's deep space fleet had arrived. All ships. This is Admiral Sorahan on the UNS Defiant, came a voice over the comm. Captain Park, you look like you could use some help. All ships weapons free. Let's finish this. The human fleet opened fire. 11 ships, fresh and undamaged, poured their full arsenal into the 2 remaining krill hive ships. The krill tried to respond, but they were built to prey on the weak and unprepared. They had never faced an enemy that fought back with such fury. In the medical bay of the Indomitable, Yuna finished synthesizing her pheromone disruptor. She loaded it into the ship's ventilation system, designed to be dispersed as a gas. Captain, I'm releasing the compound now, she reported. The disruption was immediate. The krill fighters began attacking each other. The hive ship's coordinated defense fell apart. The creatures that had seemed unstoppable minutes ago were now confused and vulnerable. The human fleet pressed its advantage. Missiles and energy beams tore into the krill vessels. One hive ship tried to flee, but the UNS Defiant cut it off. The other tried to fight, but 11 human ships were too much. Inside the dying first hive ship, Tay and her Marines blasted their way to an exterior hull. They used explosive charges to blow a hole and jumped into space, trusting their suits to keep them alive. The UNS Defiant picked them up, its rescue shuttles darting through the debris field. 3 hours after the battle began, it was over. All 3 krill hive ships were destroyed or fleeing. Varen Prime was free. Jiho sat in his captain's chair, surrounded by smoke and sparking consoles. His ship was barely functional. 47 of his crew were dead. 200 more were injured, but they had won. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the planet, Day reported. It's Commander Hyun. Put him through. The Varani commander's face appeared on the screen. He was crying. You came. You actually came. How can we ever thank you? Jiho thought about his dead crew members. He thought about the ship that might never fly again. He thought about the political nightmare this would cause with the Galactic Assembly. You already did, Jiho said. You called for help. You trusted that someone would answer. That's thanks enough. Below, on Varan Prime, the Varani who had survived emerged from their shelters. They looked up at the sky and saw human ships where Krill hive ships had been. They had cried out for help. And against all odds, when the entire galaxy had turned away, humanity had answered. The Galactic Assembly Chamber was built to intimidate. It rose 300 meters high, with seats arranged in concentric circles that climbed toward a domed ceiling. Representatives from 200 species sat in those seats. Looking down at whoever stood at the center, Captain Jiho Park stood at that center now, still wearing his damaged uniform from the Battle of Varan Prime. He had refused to change it. The burns and tears were part of his testimony. Behind him stood Commander Hyun and 10,000 Varani survivors. They filled the lower gallery, silent witnesses to what was about to happen. This council recognizes Captain Jiho Park of the species designated as human, announced High Counselor Vex, a Draxian with scales that gleamed like polished steel. You have been summoned to answer for unauthorized military action in Assembly-protected space. Jiho said nothing. He had learned that silence could be more powerful than words. 3 weeks ago, Vex continued, you entered the Varan system without authorization. You engaged in combat with Krill forces, resulting in the destruction of 3 hive ships. While we acknowledge the Varani situation was unfortunate, your actions violated 17 separate assembly protocols. Unfortunate, Jiho repeated quietly. You called genocide unfortunate. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Vex's expression hardened. The assembly does not have unlimited resources. We must make difficult choices about where to deploy our forces. The Varani situation was evaluated and determined to be low priority. 8 billion lives, Jiho said. That was your low priority. Captain Park, you are here to answer charges, not make speeches, Vex said sharply. The assembly has determined that your actions, while emotionally understandable, were reckless and dangerous. You risked interspecies war for a species that contributed little to galactic civilization. Therefore, the Assembly is imposing a fine of 10 billion credits on the human government, and you are personally barred from Assembly space. Jiho almost laughed. They were going to fine Earth for saving lives. The absurdity was stunning. Before he could respond, Commander Hyun stepped forward. The Varani moved slowly, still recovering from wounds suffered during the occupation, but his voice was strong. I request permission to address the council. Vex looked annoyed. This is highly irregular. The Varani are not members of this council. No, Hyun agreed. Because you let us die. The chamber went silent. Hyun walked to stand beside Jiho. When he spoke, his words carried through the vast space. 3 weeks ago, my people sent you our first distress call. We told you the Krill were attacking. We begged for help. Do you know what we received in response? Silence, not even the courtesy of refusal. Just silence. Hyun pulled out a data pad. I have here the complete record of our communications. 47 distress calls sent to Assembly forces. 47 calls that were received and filed. Not one ship came. Not one. The Assembly has limited resources, said Counselor Mira, a Luminar. We must prioritize based on strategic importance. Strategic importance, Hyun repeated. He turned to face the assembled species. Let me tell you what happened while you discussed our strategic importance. The Krill processed 4 billion of my people. 4 billion. They were taken to hive ships and broken down into raw materials. Their bodies became food. Their bones became building materials. Their minds were extracted and absorbed. His voice cracked. I watched children taken from their parents. I saw my best friend dissolved alive. I heard millions screaming for help that never came. And you sat here in your beautiful chamber and decided we weren't strategically important enough. Jiho watched the council members. Some looked uncomfortable. Others remained impassive. But they were listening. Then came a message, Hyun continued, from a species I'd never heard of. Humans. They said help was coming. 1 ship against 3 hive ships. Suicide odds. But they came anyway. Hyun turned to Jiho. Captain Park didn't ask if we were strategically important. He didn't calculate the cost versus benefit. He heard people crying for help and he came. That's the difference between humanity and you. Emotional response is not a basis for military deployment, Vex said coldly. No, Hyun agreed. You deploy based on logic, on calculations, On strategy, and while you calculated my people died. Tell me, counselor, what's the logical equation for that? How many lives equals 0 strategic importance? Jiho decided it was time to add his voice. He pulled out his own datapad. I have something to show the council, he said. He activated a holographic display. These are the assembly meeting minutes from when the Varani distress calls were received. I had to do some creative network accessing to get them, but they make interesting reading. The hologram showed the council chamber 3 weeks earlier, representatives discussing the Varani situation. The Draxian representative says, and I quote, "The Varani have no military assets and limited trade value. Deploying forces to their defense would cost more than their entire economic output for a decade. Recommendation, file and forget." Jiho switched to another recording. The Luminar representative adds, "This presents an opportunity to study krill behavior without risking valuable assets. Recommend observation only." The chamber erupted in shouting. Representatives tried to deny the recordings, claim they were fabricated, argue that context was missing. Jiho spoke over them. "You didn't just ignore the Varani. You actively decided to let them die, and then you had the nerve to fine us for saving them." President Sorahan's hologram appeared beside Jiho. The projection was life-sized, and she looked directly at the council. "This is President Sorahan of Earth," she said. "I'm here to make an announcement. Earth is formally withdrawing its application for full assembly membership. We will not join an organization that values calculation over compassion." The chamber went silent. "Furthermore," Sora continued, "Earth is founding a new alliance. We're calling it the Sentinel Alliance. Our purpose is simple. We defend those who cannot defend themselves. We answer distress calls. We don't calculate strategic importance. We simply help." She looked across the council members. "Any species that shares these values is welcome to join us. Any species that needs protection can call on us, and we will answer." Counselor Vex stood, his scales bristling. "This is outrageous. You cannot simply create a rival organization." "Watch us," Sora said. "You claim to represent civilization. But civilization isn't about technology or power. It's about helping each other. It's about standing up when someone falls. You forgot that. So we'll remind you." Jiho added his own message. "You want to define us? Fine us. You want to ban me from assembly space? Ban me. But know this, every species in this galaxy is watching. They're seeing what your civilization really means. And they're learning that when they cry for help, the assembly will calculate while their people die." The hologram of President Sora continued. "The Sentinel Alliance begins with 2 members, humanity and the Varani. But I suspect it won't stay that small, because there are a lot of species out there who don't meet your standards of strategic importance, and now they know someone will answer when they call." Over the next hour, something unprecedented happened. 47 species, all of them small or weak by assembly standards, sent formal requests to join the Sentinel Alliance. They were species that had been ignored, dismissed, or told they weren't important enough to defend. Counselor Vex tried to restore order, but the damage was done. The assembly's facade of benevolence had cracked. The recordings showed the truth. They valued power over people, strategy over lives. As the session descended into chaos, Jiho and Hyun walked out together. Behind them, 10,000 Varani followed. They left the assembly chamber with their heads high. Outside, reporters from hundreds of species swarmed them. Cameras captured everything. This moment would be broadcast across the galaxy. "Captain Park," shouted one reporter, "do you think one alliance can stand against the assembly?" Jiho thought about his crew. 47 dead, 200 wounded. He thought about the Varani. 4 billion lost, but 4 billion saved. He thought about President Sora risking Earth's position to do what was right. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know this. When someone calls for help, we won't waste time calculating if they're worth saving. We'll just go, and if that makes us enemies of the assembly, then we'll be proud enemies." Hyun spoke next. The assembly forgot what civilization means. They forgot that the strong should protect the weak, not exploit them. The Sentinel Alliance will remember. We'll be the ones who answer when others turn away. As they left the assembly complex, Jiho received a message on his personal comm. It was from Minho, who had stayed with the damaged Indomitable. "Captain, you need to see this. Ships are arriving. Lots of ships. They're all flying Sentinel Alliance colors. I think word spread fast," Jiho smiled. The galaxy had watched the assembly abandon the Varani. Now they were watching humanity offer an alternative. The fight wasn't over. The assembly wouldn't give up power easily. But for the first time in galactic history, someone had challenged their authority not with weapons but with simple decency. Somewhere in the galaxy, another species might be crying for help. And now they knew their cries wouldn't go unheard. The Sentinel Alliance was listening, and they would answer the call. 1 year later, Admiral Jiho Park stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Indomitable. The ship had been repaired, reinforced, and upgraded. But Jiho had insisted they keep the scars. Deep gouges in the hull remained visible, reminders of the Battle of Varan Prime. "Admiral, the fleet is ready," reported Commander Day, who had been promoted after the battle. 200 ships from 40 different species. "All waiting for your order." Jiho looked at the tactical display. The Sentinel Alliance had grown beyond anyone's expectations. In 1 year, they had gone from 2 species to 200. Small nations, ignored by the assembly, had flocked to the banner of an alliance that promised protection without calculation. The Krill had made another mistake. They had attacked 3 worlds simultaneously, expecting the usual pattern: distress calls followed by silence, then easy conquest. But the pattern had changed. "All ships, this is Admiral Park," Jiho said across the fleet channel. "The Krill think they can attack our allies and face no consequences. Today we teach them differently. Today we show them what happens when they touch someone under our protection." The fleet moved as one. Human ships flew alongside Varani science vessels, Torvian fighters, and Mirani medical frigates. Each species brought their own strengths. Together they were formidable. The battle was swift and brutal. The Krill hive ships encountered not scattered resistance but organized fury. Dr. Yuna's pheromone disruptor, now standard issue across the fleet, turned the Krill's hive mind against itself. Marine Commander Tay's boarding tactics, taught to soldiers from dozens of species, brought the fight directly to the Queens. Within 6 hours, the Krill were routed. For the first time in their species' history, they retreated without claiming their prey. 3 worlds were saved, and the Sentinel Alliance proved it could protect its members. Back on Earth, President Sorahan watched the battle reports with satisfaction. The political landscape of the galaxy had shifted dramatically. The Galactic Assembly was fracturing from within. The Draxian Empire faced rebellion in its outer colonies. Young Draxians, inspired by human intervention ethics, questioned why their mighty military saved no one but themselves. Protests filled the streets of their capital world. The Luminar Collective's technological monopoly was broken. Human engineers, following Jiho's philosophy, shared innovations freely with Alliance members. Advanced medicine, weapons, and ship designs flowed through the Alliance without the usual fees and restrictions. Even the ancient Velkari Dominion felt the pressure. When their own colony called for help during a natural disaster, the Assembly debated for 3 days. The Sentinel Alliance arrived in 3 hours. The political message was clear. On Varan Prime, Commander Hyun oversaw the reconstruction of his world. The planet still bore scars from the Krill occupation, but life was returning. Cities were being rebuilt. Children who had hidden in bunkers now played in parks under human-designed defense satellites. Hyun worked closely with engineer Minho on a joint project. A new class of colony ship designed to rescue refugees from oppressed worlds. The ships combined Varani mathematical precision with human engineering creativity. They were beautiful and functional, able to carry millions to safety. "You know what I like about working with humans?" Hyun asked Minho as they reviewed the latest designs. "Our charming personalities?" Minho suggested. "Your refusal to accept impossible," Hyun said. "My people were taught to calculate, to measure, to understand limitations. Humans look at limitations and ask, how do we get around that?" "It's remarkable," Minho grinned. "We're too stubborn to quit. It's our best quality and our worst." In the medical research station orbiting Earth, Dr. Yuna made another breakthrough. By studying the biology of different Alliance species, she developed treatments that had eluded researchers for centuries. Her work combining human adaptability with alien biological knowledge was revolutionizing medicine across the galaxy. When the Assembly tried to claim her research under their intellectual property laws, Yuna's response was broadcast across all channels. "Knowledge that saves lives belongs to everyone. If you want to fine me for that, get in line." The Assembly never filed the fine. Public opinion had turned against them too strongly. Marine Commander Tay, now General Tay, ran the Alliance's military academy. Here soldiers from hundreds of species trained together. She taught them human combat doctrines, but she also learned from them. Torvian patience, Mirani precision, Varani mathematical strategy. She absorbed it all and created something new. Her most famous lesson was simple. We don't leave people behind. Not our soldiers, not our civilians, not our allies. Everyone comes home or no one comes home. That's the difference between us and them. The students, representing species that had been abandoned by the assembly, took that lesson to heart. They became the first generation of soldiers who fought not for profit or territory, but for the principle that every life mattered. 6 months after the second Krill defeat, something unexpected happened. A Draxian admiral named Krath defected to the Sentinel Alliance. He brought 3 battle groups with him, over 50 ships and 30,000 personnel. I joined the military to protect people, Krath explained at his first Alliance meeting. But the Empire only protects the profitable. I watched your battle at Varen Prime. I saw what true protection looks like. I want to be part of that. His defection started a wave. Assembly military personnel, disgusted by their leadership's refusal to help those in need, began switching sides. The Assembly's strength was being hollowed out from within. The Assembly tried to fight back. They declared the Sentinel Alliance illegal. They imposed trade sanctions. They tried to isolate humanity and its allies diplomatically. It didn't work. Too many species had been ignored for too long. When given a choice between an assembly that calculated their worth and an alliance that simply helped, the choice was easy. In the Indomitable's ready room, Jiho met with his senior staff. They were planning their response to another crisis, a plague on a mining colony that the assembly had quarantined and forgotten. The assembly says entering the quarantine zone violates medical protocols, Tay reported. Since when do we care what the assembly says? Minyo asked cheerfully. We've violated about 300 of their protocols already. Yuna had already prepared medical supplies. I have a treatment ready. It's not perfect, but it should save most of the infected. We need to move fast. Then we move, Jiho decided. Prepare the fleet. We're breaking that quarantine. As his staff filed out, Jiho stood alone looking at the star chart. Red marks indicated species under Sentinel Alliance protection. Blue marks showed assembly territory. The blue was shrinking while the red expanded. He thought about that first distress call from Varen Prime, the desperate plea that the galaxy had ignored. If he had followed assembly thinking, if he had calculated the cost versus benefit, he would have stayed home. 8 billion Varani would be dead and the galaxy would have continued as it always had. But he hadn't calculated. He had simply heard someone crying for help and answered. That simple act had changed everything. A message came through from President Sora. Admiral, I thought you should know. The Assembly Council is meeting an emergency session. Apparently 30 more species are threatening to leave unless the Assembly reforms its policies. They're finally starting to understand. Jiho smiled. Maybe there's hope for them yet. Maybe, Sora agreed. But even if they reform, they learned this lesson because we forced them to. That says everything about the difference between our philosophies. Later that day, Jiho visited the memorial wall on the Indomitable. 47 names were etched there, crew members who died at Varen Prime. He came here often, remembering their sacrifice. Was it worth it? He asked the wall quietly. 47 lives for 4 billion saved. The math says yes, but I knew you all. I remember your faces, he traced one name with his finger. Lieutenant Hana, who had died keeping the shields running. She had been 23 years old, fresh from the academy with her whole life ahead of her. I hope you'd think it was worth it, Jiho said. I hope you'd be proud of what we built. The door opened behind him. It was Commander Hyun, visiting the human ship to discuss relief operations. I come here sometimes, Hyun said quietly, to remember what your people gave for mine. 47 names. I know them all now. I've researched each one. Their families, their dreams, their stories. Why? Jiho asked. Because they deserve to be remembered as more than numbers, Hyun said. The assembly would reduce them to statistics. But each name here represents a person who chose to help strangers. That choice saved my entire species. They stood together in silence. Two representatives of different worlds united by a simple truth. Some things mattered more than calculations. Outside the Indomitable, the Sentinel Alliance fleet prepared for another mission. 200 ships from 40 species, all dedicated to a radical idea that protecting the helpless was worth the cost. The galaxy would never be the same. The Assembly's age of calculated indifference was ending. A new age was beginning, led by a species that the advanced races had dismissed as primitive. And somewhere in the dark between stars, another distress call was being sent. Someone was crying for help, hoping someone would hear. They didn't know it yet, but their cry would not go unheard. The Sentinel.